For example, part of my job is IED defeat. IED stands for Improvised Explosive Device, and they were all the rage in the early 2000s. Leaders in the Army National Guard frequently encounter new soldiers who are inexperienced at their job, and because of this, they don't perform their job very well. If you're in that situation, what do? Hi, my name's Cody, and I talk about the Army National Guard. Over the years, I've experienced all types of leaders, good leaders, bad leaders, and everything in between. I've examined most of them and try to study what they do. I take the good things that they do and add it to what I do, and I've seen the bad stuff and I've tried to steer away from that. Part of being a leader is getting people to do what you need them to do to accomplish their mission. And soldiers are people too, so it's important to know how to motivate them so you can lead effectively. In order to lead effectively, you need to examine your leadership style. Now, there are many different types of leadership styles, but the one that comes to mind when people think of the military is autocratic. Now, autocratic is also known as authoritarian leadership, and that's where the one person in charge is in charge of everything, and what they say goes. This is definitely experienced as soon as you get into the military, because autocratic is the leadership style of drill sergeants, and that's part of their job. That's what they do. Many soldiers can go their whole career and only experience this type of leadership, because that's what they experience, and then that's what they enforce. Autocratic leadership is an effective style of leadership in certain circumstances, but me personally, I have more of a blended approach. I start with a coaching style of leadership, and in a coaching style, it focuses on identifying the strengths and weaknesses of the individual, in this case soldiers, and then building on both of those things by amplifying the strengths and then working on the weaknesses and focusing on soldier progression. And I wanted to focus on these two types of leadership in this video because they seem to be polar opposites, but when used in conjunction with one another, they're pretty good. I see it a lot throughout the Army National Guard where NCOs, or non-commissioned officers, they go around and they bark orders at their soldiers and they expect things to be done. And then when questions arise from the soldiers, the leader goes on the defensive and says things like, "You're going to do what I said because I'm the NCO," or "Last time I checked, I was the one in charge here." And in some cases, in most cases, the task gets completed and that's that. So the end state was achieved, but at what cost? If you're having to remind your soldiers of your rank and your position, then you've kind of already lost. Jocko Willink calls this a loss of leadership capital. And leadership capital is his term for the unspoken currency that's moving between leaders and their subordinates. And if you're just barking orders and that's at the cost of your leadership capital, and you're losing respect from your subordinates, and that's going to have trickle-down effect that will have repercussions in the future, and it could hurt your team cohesion. So someone might say, "Well, Cody, the autocratic style works for drill sergeants. Why can't I use it?" Great question. Drill sergeants are a specific type of NCO with a very specific job. They are there to train recruits out of bad habits from the civilian world and indoctrinate them into the ways of the Army. And that autocratic style is necessary for that type of training environment. Also, the training environment is a very controlled, specific environment for what they're doing. Drill sergeants are on all the time. Think about the life and duty of a drill sergeant. They have to be up before everyone to make sure the training is set up in order to facilitate it. They have to be subject matter experts because they have hundreds of soldiers to deal with, and they have to be looked upon as the super soldier. That means they have to go through the drill sergeant academy, stay on top of their Army knowledge, and stay on top of their physical fitness. If you're caught slipping as a drill sergeant, you might lose a little bit of respect from your subordinates, and that makes your job as an authoritarian much harder. Now, the vast majority of the Army, especially the Army National Guard, have never been drill sergeants. So once they leave basic training in AIT, they're headed back to the civilian world. They may put on a couple more pounds. They may not stay in that training mindset the whole time because you have a civilian job and other things to do. So you're just not a drill sergeant. That's pretty much the reason there. So when we get back to our units, although you do have authority, it's not the same type of authority necessary because it's not the same type of training environment as basic training. So on the other hand, we have the coaching style of leadership, which at its extreme would have problems as well. Someone who's solely in a coaching mindset or coaching method, style, approach, whatever, would be too focused on individual soldiers to focus on the team at large. Because remember, if we have a team, we have multiple duties to do, and we need to move our people in the proper places. So we can't spend all of our time focusing on individual strengths and weaknesses. Someone who is solely in the coaching style could spend too much of their own time focused on one or two individuals, and at a worst case scenario, end up doing too much of their work and not focusing on the rest of the team. The rest of the team is also going to see this and see that the leader spends too much time with one or two soldiers, which could cause a whole slew of other problems like favoritism, or, you know, even worse, some sort of relationship rumor or something like that. So being too far one way or the other is not a great deal. This is why I advocate for blending the two styles, coaching and autocratic. I start out with every soldier the same. Let's say I'm explaining a task. I ask them what their experience level with that task is. If the experience level is low, we're going to start from the very beginning and then talk our way through it as I train the soldier. While doing this, I usually open the dialogue and say exactly what we're going to be doing. I say something like, hey, I'm going to start from the very beginning because you said your experience level is low, and we'll work our way through it. Now, if I'm spending too much time on something that you already understand, stop me and we'll move past that until a point that we're both comfortable, and then we'll move from there. This part works because I'm still using my leadership experience to train them, and I'm giving them the autonomy to stop me and tell me that they're good. This is going to save time and be more efficient at what we're doing. And it's also going to break down the invisible barrier between leader and subordinate, that they can stop me and I trust their judgment to stop me and, you know, move on to something more important. That open dialogue is also important because it builds up the soldier's self-esteem that I am a leader who's willing to talk, or let them talk to me, because, I don't know, there's like an invisible barrier. Sometimes soldiers are just scared to talk to leaders, especially to speak their mind. So I like to break that down early on. And then this point is where I start bleeding into a little bit more autocratic. I'm still coaching, but I'm starting to set expectations for them. So after I'm done explaining and training them, we're going to start back from the beginning. I'm going to have them walk through a practical exercise from start to finish. And while they're doing it, they're going to talk me through it and narrate each step of what they're doing. So this helps on a couple of occasions or in a couple of spots, because they're doing the task and talking through it. And sometimes what they're saying doesn't match what they're doing. And that helps them identify, oh, this is where I messed up, so they can fix it on the spot. And it's also just mental process. As you're doing something and you're talking through it, it just helps that information stick better. Once I trust that they have a good understanding of completing the task and how it should be done, I tell them, all right, this is the standard for completing this task, and when I tell you to go do it, this is how I expect it to be done. Do we have any questions? That part's extremely important, because even though they just walk through it, they may still have questions. A lot of it may be why questions. Why did we put that here instead of put that there? Why do we need this at all? How long should it take to do this? Anything a soldier can think of that, like in class, someone might have a question but be scared to raise their hand. It opens a dialogue. I'm saying, hey, I'm here to answer your questions. You can talk to me. And once we're done here, I don't want to have to revisit this training session. So let's go ahead and hash it out now. And that's effective. And anytime a soldier withholds a question, it may be detrimental in the future, because it could have been information that was important and we could have got it out right then while we were training on it. In my experience, strictly autocratic leaders don't really respect the coaching style of leadership. They see it as too soft, and they say things like, well, these new soldiers are lazy and they don't know nothing. You tell them to go do something and it doesn't get done. They don't know anything. I've worked with a lot of NCOs who had this attitude, and I also fell into it early in my leadership career, but I quickly realized that it wasn't effective. So we're identifying that soldiers are coming to us undertrained or unprepared, and then we just complain about it. And then you have that soldier who is not wasted, but has attended training for the last no less than 14 weeks of their life, just to come to a unit and get complained at by the leadership there. That's not effective, but we can change it. What is actually happening here is caused by an imbalance of the expectations of the leader. If the leader doesn't formulate their expectations and then communicate those expectations, we're never going to solve the problem of the untrained soldier. So let's say it's true. Your soldiers are non-productive and they don't meet your expectations. What we have to do sometimes is swallow our pride and go further back in the training than we think we need to baby steps in order to build a proper foundation. Sometimes we have to tear down the whole situation of bad habits and start from scratch and build up new ones. For example, part of my job is IED defeat. IED stands for Improvised Explosive Device, and they were all the rage in the early 2000s. I was preparing for a class that I was given, and I was looking through a PowerPoint about defeating IEDs. And one slide had a picture of an IED in Afghanistan, and it had part of an IED. They take a wire and run it to the IED and then cover that wire with dirt. That creates a dirt line that we call an ant trail. So we're looking at it, and the lieutenant asked me, he's like, I understand the IED thing, but what do ants have to do with it? And it took me a second to realize he was not joking. And then I thought about, well, if he doesn't know what an ant trail is, then there are other soldiers out there who don't know what an ant trail is. And just because this is common knowledge to me, it's something that needs to be trained. And not just ant trails, but any subject can have that level of, it's a commonality. And although it seems silly, an ant trail, it's a huge piece of terminology in my profession. So that's going to happen with all professions, and especially the more technical we get with things, the more prevalent that problem can be. Although my first instinct was to think, wow, this guy doesn't know what an ant trail is, ha ha. That is ineffective. Luckily I didn't say that, but it opened a door to me to realize that there's more training to be done. So the ant trail thing is common in my job, but I had an expectation on this lieutenant to know it. And it's not just that he didn't know, it's that he couldn't know. He doesn't have the same level of experience. And we just have to keep that in mind sometimes. Soldiers are working at different levels of experience. Now, I'm not advocating for making excuses or coddling the soldiers, but what I am saying is that it is imperative for us as leaders to set our expectations and then train our soldiers to meet those expectations. This also applies outside of the military as well, in the civilian workforce. Think about the best boss you ever had, where they're just yelling and barking orders all the time and telling you how you did things wrong, or were they showing you the ropes and training you to the expectations of the company so you could be successful and then your job could be successful. The same goes for parenting. Now, my kids have a much different childhood than I had growing up, so I expected them to know things at a younger age. When I was a kid, whenever I would do something like spill a milk or spill a glass at the dinner table, I would get yelled at, or God forbid it was in the living room, I might get a whipping, right? That was just, so when that happened as a new father, I instinctually would go back to my parents' parental methods, because that's the only experience that I had with that experience. Double up on the experiences. But that was the only experience I had with that occurrence, right? No matter what side you're on, if that's the only experience you have with it, that's kind of what you go towards instinctually. So I had to evaluate, why would I get upset for a kid spilling a drink, and what could I do to prevent it? As scary as it was, my parents' method was not good at preventing spills. So what we did was we put measures in place and set our expectations. So for instance, drinks are for the dinner table, and no matter what time of day it is, your drink stays on the dinner table. Now, that is going to isolate the drink area for spillage so the rest of the house is safe from spills. Another expectation is, hey, we're not going to fill the cup up all the way. Okay? When you're not holding the cup, you put it to the center of the table. And we taught our kids to do this. And when the inevitable spill happens, because mistakes do happen, instead of sitting there in fear of repercussion, the kid just uprights their cup and then they go to get a towel and start the cleanup process. So the kids have learned how to fill their cups, where is it safe to put, and then responsibility of cleaning up after themselves. So by setting expectations and teaching them how to do it, that prevented more spills. The main takeaway here is that as leaders, it's our jobs to train soldiers, and if we identify that they're untrained, then that means they need more training, and that's what we're there for. Remember, our rank is not an entitlement. It's something that we earn every time we work with our soldiers. Thank you for listening to me talk. I hope you got something out of it. If you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe to the channel. And if I left something out, leave it in the comments. Thanks.